Hi, I'm Tara Beebe. I'm a senior associate with KFA Architecture and currently working with Hyatt to open the Shea at Ivy Station in Culver City.
Tara, thank you. I didn't know if you were on the call yet, so I'm delighted that you're here. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
Rudy, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm Rudy Bay or Rudy Pakravan. I'm the principal at Seidel Pakravan Architects in the Bay Area, and we are currently partnering with the City of Berkeley to create a series of outdoor spaces and parklets for restaurants that have been struggling during the pandemic.
Thank you, Rudy. Glad that you're here. Alexis, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Will. I'm Alexis Redinger. I founded and run Cream Inc. We're based in Chinatown in Los Angeles. Over 20 years in the heart of the food world, and so we do a lot of restaurants and some remote nature lodge and sacred space.
Thank you, Alexis.
Yeah.
And if anyone's wondering what those noises are, that's Alexis has parrots.
Here.
So
You want to let everybody see you? This is Charlie. We've got Charlie and Lola.
excellent. So thank you so much. Lauren Rote, welcome.
Hi, well, I don't have parrots, but nice to see all of you. I'm founding principal of Rote Studio. We have offices in Los Angeles, Houston, and New York. I spent a good, wonderful long time in Los Angeles, and it's still our largest office. So though I'm not there, I'm highly connected. We do a lot of hotel work and in the midst of renovating hotels, even starting new ones, even in this pandemic, and really feeling bad for a lot of our hotel owners who are really suffering.
Thank you for joining us today. Delighted that you're here. Michael Stromberg from HKS, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Will. Michael Stromer with HKS. We're a large firm, about 1,300 people, headquarters in Dallas, but here in LA in Westwood. I'm been with HKS for 18 years. I'm a principal focused on hospitality. So excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, so as an interactive conversation, I'm encouraging you all to sort of interrupt with each other and to sort of compliment or contrast what each other shares. But I really want to open this discussion. So in the last several of these, we've really looked at what you are noticing, the lessons learned during this pandemic. And we're asking each of you to maybe share a little insight into how this is influencing and impacting some of your design decisions moving forward. So we'll just go through the order of earlier, and we'll start with Tara and work our way through.
Sure. I think that a lot of aspects of hospitality design, and I'm going to speak from the perspective of the Shea, which is scheduled to open towards the end of the year. I think the design of that, the Studio Collective was the interior designer on that project. And the interesting part about it is I think hospitality design has, and the design of this hotel specifically, has really focused on highlighting or providing a lot of small seating groups within the hotel that people can work, hang out, visit in small groups, but it's not this vast place anymore. It's about having more contained spaces for people to have smaller meetings, whether it's social or professional. And I think that that's something that is an evolution of hospitality, but through the pandemic, it's become something that is happening a lot faster, or the demand for that is happening a lot faster. And the other thing that I was noticing, well, with the freehand, for example, the freehand in downtown LA with Seidel Group, they really small hotel rooms, but the amenity spaces were the focus of the property. So the food and beverage program and the bar on the roof, it was really focused on food and beverage and giving people a place to stay that was comfortable, but getting them out to those amenity spaces to enjoy them. I see now an evolution back to focusing on the room and how to create maybe different seating groups or different ways to experience the hotel room now. So as a next step, having more of a focus on having seating in the hotel room, and it's not just a place to sleep anymore. It's somewhere that you might want to be or work. So initially, those are just a couple thoughts. I mean, I have more, but I'm sure we'll get into more of them during the discussion.
Well, thank you. Rudy, interested to hear your thoughts.
So one thing that has become really evident, I think, during the pandemic and all the civic protests and just in general, the kind of mood of the country right now, is the importance, I think, of the relationship between architecture and sort of policy. And I think that goes, in all aspects, from residential, commercial, zoning, et cetera. And for us, one thing that's been really, really important has been partnering with the City of Berkeley in our case, but just to create a relationship and understand that planning and all the different aspects that the planning department and the building department, all the different aspects that make up these pretty strict codes, actually have a huge, profound impact on the way people live their lives, whether it's a single family zoning issue or just the City of Berkeley has removed a lot of restrictions around small businesses getting outdoor permits. And just removing that impediment has been incredible for these businesses to take advantage of the street space that usually has so many regulations around it. And so I think advocating as architects for better policies is actually a really, really important part of our work and our discipline, whether it's with regards to housing or commercial or hospitality. I think there's always a way to create a kind of more equitable space, and it starts with partnering with kind of jurisdictions and cities.
Thank you. Alexis, looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
I want to echo Rudy and say, we were in the early conversations with Culver City and really suggesting that, street closures and widening sidewalks, that there was a real opportunity for them to take the bull by the horns and be super progressive. And they did. They moved on it and they shut down Main Street. We have a little restaurant over there called Piccalilli. And I was there last night to look at the patio, which honestly is, we've got street lights and, a bunch of furniture that has to be moved in every night and then moved out once a week for the farmer's market. So there's some real challenges to actually creating space that is at all welcoming. And the health department is refusing to allow them to have candles on the tables. So it's a little tiny thing, but that makes a huge impact in someone's experience. And I think, we're a pro bono consultant for City of LA on the Al Fresco program. And I've been trying to generate some deeper conversations about making some of these changes more permanent and actually starting to impact the face of the city. But the health department's on my list now too, but they have been for years.
Thank you. We do hope some of these changes actually become part of our everyday because they are quite beneficial. Lauren Rote, welcome. We look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thank you. Well, I think all of us have learned a lot. And, my hotel clients and others are thinking, will life ever go back to normal? Will people ever travel again? And yes, of course, people will travel again. I do think this pandemic will have lasting effects. I don't think it will go on like it is forever, but I think that some of the lessons that we've learned, I hope that will stay in our minds. I think, first of all humans have probably realized that we're more similar than we thought we are, and that all of us really need to work together for the common good of each other, for the common good of the environment, whether it's air quality or disease control, that all the money in the world will be nowhere if we succumb to bad air and diseases. So I think it's been the ultimate equalizer, and I have really enjoyed seeing that in some of my, I guess you would say, wealthier clients who actually have had a little bit of a wow moment. And, you know, what is life all about? That was the philosophical side of it. And then also I think that we as architects and designers always knew we had a responsibility to design, of course, safely for ADA, for all people. But I think now it goes well beyond that. And I think we have to look very closely at the buildings we do and the interiors we do to, you know, question, is the air quality good? Is there enough fresh air? Where's the intake? Where's the output? And just really look at it very holistically. Of course, you know, as an interior designer, I have the responsibility to make it beautiful. But I like to obviously dig deeper, and I think that this pandemic has told us all that we need to, you know, using the right materials and the right environment. So I think there's been a lot of lessons that have come out of it, and frankly, we probably should have learned these a long time ago, and maybe we wouldn't be where we are right now.
Thank you. Very, very astute. Michael, we look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, I think after, you know, seeing everything shut down and the lack of travel has really affected, of course, the hotel industry. And what I'm excited about, what the potential this leads to, is how we can work with developers and owners to work to reposition existing properties, or, you know, think about differently the design of new properties, where maybe these hotels don't just focus on serving tourism or visitors from out of town, but really connect with the local community. The hotels, I think, have an advantage because they already have the infrastructure and a lot of the amenities that could serve the locals, where, you know, you could think about, of course, the great food and beverage always connects with the locals if it's done properly. But what about opening up the meeting space? If people are working from home and in the future even don't go back to work, where, you know, some of these office spaces may not be looked at the same way, the meeting space within a hotel could be repositioned to serve as this collaboration space. We think about our office, you know, maybe there's an option where we don't all go back to the office, but we meet at a couple times a week at a hotel, and they had these great amenities that could serve for that purpose of collaboration. And then what about the locals using the fitness areas? If we elevated the fitness space and open up it to have memberships to the local community as well. So now the hotel isn't just dependent on travel, but it's actually more consistently serving the community and equalizing, maybe hopefully equalizing some of the income.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like the idea of the staycation, I feel like has really come a long way, and that's all people can do right now. So they're driving to places that are closer, not going on planes. But does that stick? And is that something that ends up, the hotel becomes more of an amenity for residents in the city than it has
Exactly.
been for travelers in the past? Yeah.
Yeah, I know, you know, a lot of properties sell day passes for, you know, pool amenities and things like that, which is a start of an idea. But I think going further and opening up, and even, you know, thinking about for new construction or renovations, how would you do it differently to serve the local community? I think it's pretty exciting. I think there's a lot of potential there.
What do you think about the idea of the staycation, Alexis?
I think it's okay. You know, I am sure I'm more interested in outlier areas and have been for years and years. And I have a cabin right outside of LA. I think it's so important if you're in an urban environment to get out and connect in with nature. And there's been a pretty big exodus out to Joshua Tree, which, by the way, there's not a lot of great architectural stock out there for all y'all tuned into this panel. But I personally am very interested in portal type properties and spaces. And so more sort of interesting typologies that have already been started or are going to continue to emerge. You know, we're looking for a client to do a psilocybin retreat. And these things that are maybe perhaps more transformative, you know, internally and with your mind, that could be right here. We have another property we're working on as well, and I think it's become, we've been working on it for a year already, but it's become more relevant in this conversation, and it's in partnership with a death doula, and it's actually Spaces for the Dying. So I think this sort of move towards sacred and grounded space is important.
Thank you. That's a very profound observation. Lauren Rote, I'm really interested in hearing from you on some of the, you know, specific design actions, improvements, and innovations that you're recognizing the need to integrate into your hospitality projects now more than ever.
Well, of course, there's a whole series of them, and the quick ones had to do with sanitation and making sure things are clean. So obviously, the UV lighting has been brought on board to clean the rooms at night. It's out by the time the guests get there. Housekeeping, there's now seals on the door, and it has a date and a time that the housekeepers were in there, so that you don't book that room for 2 days or whatever it is, and the guest knows that it was cleaned on X date, and so they're free to enter in there. There's self-cleaning materials in the room now in case you don't want the housekeeper to come in, so you can clean your own things with your cool stuff. We are talking to our clients a lot about air quality. Of course, hotels for the most part have open operable windows, so that's a good thing. We're starting to talk about if a client, hotel occupant wants to turn the air off in their room and take their own fresh air and then have their little portable heater or portable air conditioner, those can be supplied to the room so they don't intake the hotel's air. A lot of things that go back to personal control of your room, of your space, of how you live in a hotel. Of course, you could remote check-in in most new hotels and have been able to for a while, but most people don't. Now, of course, they're starting to. So a lot of things are going to to no touch, so voice control. So you can check in, you can go to your room, you can open it with your phone, you don't have to see anybody. And then when you get in there, you can talk to the television, talk to the phone, talk to everything. So it becomes very low touch. And there's lots of other things, but I think those are some of the top of the mind. We're talking about the big dilemma is how on earth to deal with a bar. You know, none of us want to think that we can never go back to a fun bar, right? So is there some sort of a body scanner that says, okay, this person not only doesn't have a temperature, but they have no germs, they can come in? You know, who knows? But I think the rest of the hotels are working fairly naturally. We're just moving things apart. We're making more distinct spaces. They're starting to, really deal with it.
Lauren, I was on a panel with Simon Kim, who's a superstar chef out of New York. And he was bringing up the point of the temperature check. And they just really didn't want to use the one that's basically like a gun being pointed at your head. So he
welcome, right? Exactly.
Right. But they have one that's like a body scanner. It's maybe not germs, but for the temperature.
Mm-hmm. And those are relatively easy. But that's just your temperature, and do you have it yet? And it's really hard to say. I think, and even restaurants are going to be okay. It's really just the bars, because bars are all about butting up right next to someone. It's about being together. So it's really, that one's going to be tricky.
Mm-hmm. Outdoor bars, gerbil bars.
So Michael, I'm really curious about, from your perspective, how much of this is sort of a distraction with regards to, Band-Aid responses versus, improvements that will actually improve our public and mental health. And I'm curious from your point of view, some of the projects that you're probably already working on beforehand, having to shift midstream, and what considerations you're bringing forward with that.
Yeah, I think that the For new construction, it's going to be a little different. We're going to, find ways where we can improve air quality through the initial infrastructure, which would be different, of course, on a renovation where you may be limited. But yeah, I think a lot of these quick responses or band-aids, as you mentioned, are things that will come and go. They'll be put away. We'll stop talking about it and stop focusing on it long term. I think the most important part is really thinking about how to position the properties for success going forward. And I think that truly gets back to the connection with the community. And so it's not just an independent thing that's serving people from out of town, but really connecting with the community. I really, I think that's where the future is for properties to be successful, is having that community engagement.
Can I ask a little bit more about that, Michael? I'm really also interested in exploring the space between the building and the public realm, and that's where policy impacts a lot of your design decisions. And obviously, the project itself can't carry the entire burden. Some of this has to be addressed at the interaction between the private and public realm. What changes are you seeing as they impact some of your strategies to make the project a part of the community?
Well, I think it starts on the ground floor. Literally, it's opening up the ground and making it accessible, not making the locals know what's inside, and making it easy to get in, and maybe not all the amenities are accessed through going through a central lobby. Maybe there's a lot more porosity, as you say, where you have multiple connections directly into those spaces that you're trying to get. If it's a coffee venue or a food venue, that you're not feeling like you're not supposed to be there because you're walking through the lobby and you're not a guest, but really having multiple points of access, so that people walking by will feel like they're welcome and invited.
Thank you. Tara, with all of your experience with adaptive reuse, what are you noticing especially in some of the areas of town that you might have this older historic resource?
I think there's going to be more adaptive reuse as people rethink the office space and the amount of office space that we have. I think there will be a shift in just available space, and we'll need to reimagine, how we design cities for living, working, and meeting and collaborating. So it's not necessarily specific building types or neighborhoods. I think it's a paradigm shift as far as just the way that we work. I do want to echo something that Alexis said about the health department. I think
Thank you.
We're in Southern California. We're in a place where indoor-outdoor dining is so advantageous and important culturally for our city, and yet it is so hard to get a restaurant permitted that has an indoor-outdoor component. And I think on the policy side, there's got to be more collaboration with the health department to understand what the concerns are, because we've got to, especially now, we've got to be able to figure that out. We've got to be able to figure out how to have a restaurant that can survive in an indoor-outdoor environment. I want this to stay. I want the outdoor seating to stay. It's like, I'm in Culver City, but I feel like there's Florence there, and that's great. But how do we get that to work in a long-term way?
Well, and it's funny because the field inspectors, I don't know if there's any health people on here, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but the field inspectors have been okay with sound practice. And there's things that plan checkers will not approve that field inspectors, if everything's being managed well, they don't have an issue with. So it's like internally there's even a schism.
I'd like to add to that also and say something that Alexis mentioned earlier is how, and Tara just mentioned, is how to keep these changes with regards to outdoor dining, outdoor, even hair salons, and just creating these kind of vibrant streets, how to make those permanent. And I think that a lot of times, businesses with bigger resources can address some of these issues, but smaller businesses or folks without the kind of resources to wait for these lengthy turnaround times with regards to permits, whether it's health department or planning, or just don't get a chance to even participate. And so how do we all kind of advocate for this to become something permanent and something easy? And I also, just changes the streetscape, and it changes the whole nature of the neighborhood in a really positive way, as you were saying. Did you say you said it reminds you of Florence?
Florence.
That's great. So I think those are really, really important things to keep beyond the kind of Band-Aid, 6 foot of distance or keeping things clean. Just this idea of how using the fantastic resource of outdoor space that we have, particularly in California, but in so many places that at least can do it, seasonally.
Rudy, I've actually been bugging the city. They're sort of ignoring me right now, but because the 90-day term on the al fresco program we have here isn't sound for a restaurant owner. I mean, no one's going to make that capital investment with that limited amount of time.
Absolutely.
Doesn't pencil out. So, in situations where we have a client that has a tiny takeaway, it's been here for 50 years with 13 parking spots, and I'm sure at one point they were required to have that many, but I'd like to be permanently rededicated to patio for them before we make that investment.
That's so hugely important, and it's such a great point in general, how much energy and time we devote to cars and thinking about cars and their parking spaces and how they move through the city, and much less about pedestrians and people commuting via transit. And I think that that's a brilliant point, because if we start thinking about people a little bit more and less about cars, I think that would help.
And parks.
More equitable.
I've always loved it that in Paris I can drink a bottle of wine in a park.
Yeah.
I don't know why Americans can't. It sucks.
So I'm going to shift over to Lauren with your practice being so expansive with regards to so many cities that you interact with. And my apologies, this puppy just is jumping all over the place. But Lauren, which municipality, which public agency is leading, with innovation and allowing these types of design interactions to occur more easily and more readily?
Well, it's interesting that, it's interesting that you're asking, and I must admit, I'm not as in tune with the agencies and what they're allowing or not allowing, but as some of you know, I spend a good bit of time in Manhattan, and I have an apartment there now, and I live in Nomad, and prior to this, Nomad had no outside cafes. It was very barren. The streets had absolutely no charm, and they have popped up, every single one of them has popped up with an outdoor cafe, and they're adorable and they're charming, and it's really turned the neighborhood around. And they happened fast, and I really don't know what the city allowed or did not allow, but it has happened fast, and it's happened rampant. And of course, in Texas, we're still the Wild West, so we kind of do what we want to do. There's not as many. And so, what, I think all of us were shocked. You wanted to drink your bottle of wine in the park. Well, so like day one, Texas was margaritas to go, beer to go, wine to go.
Texas was already like that.
Well, and they kind of turned it around. So I think they're happy that you get drive through and get your 6-pack again.
At the beer barn.
Exactly, at the beer, right. So, we have seen it very easy in Houston as well. We had a little bit of a setback, so we definitely had to go to more all outdoor dining, and it's popped up, even though it's super hot, it's popped up pretty quickly as well. So again, I'm sorry, I don't know the code rules, but it appears in New York like there were no rules, just because it happened so fast. I'm sure there were.
So Michael, HKS is part of some of the most spectacular hospitality forums you can imagine. All of our stadiums, all of our, so much of our economic recovery will be hand in hand with hospitality. You know, like, how are you carrying that burden as an architect? And, you know, how do you match the urgency with, you know, with regards to the health concerns?
Good question. I think, you know, on the hospitality side, we're working with developers to figure out how to respond and how to reposition properties so they can become profitable again. I think the stadium, the arenas, the venues that we have are going to be more of a long-term thing, but we're doing a lot of research on how to bring back audiences virtually. And I know you all have seen it. I don't want to get off topic on the hospitality side, but we're doing a lot of research. We're, you know, fortunate to be a part of a big firm where we have people that can focus on extensive research and really becoming influential, which is a great value, and how we can apply that to our projects once we've, you know, focused in on where to make an impact. But on the hospitality side, I think we're you know, helping, like I said, developers figure out how to reposition properties that are existing that are in need of change, and then, you know, on new construction, of course, figuring out ways to make, you know, the right social impact, positive impact, as well as environmental impact moving forward.
And since there's so many other Texans on this call, Michael, you know, what are you sort of importing to the Los Angeles area in your hospitality design that comes from that heart of Texas?
Well, as others touched on before, it was quite shocking coming out to California after, you know, growing up in Texas. Texas was the wild, wild west. We could do, not just Texas, but the other areas that we were working in. It was much easier to get things done, much quicker. I was fortunate to go through design and construction of multiple projects before coming out here. And then you coming out to California, it's entitlements. It's such a slowdown. Everything is a very regulated process. It costs everyone much more money and slows the process down. So I think that's the big shock for me. You know, the outdoor dining, the, you know, connection with the pedestrian, that realm, that's always something that we try and integrate with our projects. California, you know, is fortunate to have that great weather. We can really leverage it year round, but there are the parts of the country where it's more seasonal. So we have to figure out ways to have enclosures and, you know, way to temper the condition depending on the season. But yeah, I think, as others mentioned, it's really having the connection with the pedestrian, the community, and the ground level interaction is really key to the success of a project.
Thank you. Tara, I would like if you have a chance to sort of follow up on this, you know, this urgency between economic recovery and the role that hospitality and hospitality design, you know, especially in you know, Southern California, for instance, where hospitality is, you know, I would say a third, or, you know, even, you know, a 2/3 of our economy.
I think, yeah, I mean, on the hotel side, why are people in the future, why are people going to be traveling? Is it going to be more about wanting a cultural immersion experience? Is it going to be more people wanting to, someone said before, get out of the city, and there's more of a respite component of it than the exploration of a city? Or is that going to go back to normal, what it had been in the past? I could see hotel properties associated with more national parks and adjacency in that way to come about a little bit more. I think we, as a society, especially in LA, have become a lot more comfortable with living in smaller spaces. And those people who are living in that 300 square foot studio with no patio right now are like, get me out of here, and are really, I think, driving a demand for that, that attainable place. It's close to LA, but it's not, you know, but it's not in the city. So I see that as an evolution. I also see, you know, if this outdoor dining thing does stick and we're able to figure that out, there's an ability to really encourage more more chefs and more, you know, there's a social responsibility factor there, that LA is a place of so many different cultures. And, you know, now if having a restaurant, because it's smaller scale and it has an outdoor dining component, is that more achievable? Does that make it more, does that give people more opportunity to develop a menu that has this authenticity, so that, you know, food and beverage wise, these little cafes can become a cultural destination as well.
Thank
You
you.
know, I
Well, go
think
ahead.
I was just going to say quickly, I think we'll see a trend of what's going to happen with hotels, and it has sort of started with Chateau Marmont, that turning into a private club. It's a real natural for a hotel to do it in this transition point, because they can open as a private club with some slightly different rules than they can as a hotel. We're also are doing the residences for the Little Nell and Aspen, and you know, because of the ownership, they really did not suffer during this economically because of the, you know, dues and the amounts that are paid by the owners. So they were able to, for the most part, stay open and keep all of their employees. So I think there is definitely something there. And as people seek to want to get away, these private club things can be fairly economical, and they can be an instant help for the hotels and help for the people that need to get away.
Yeah, I agree, Lauren. I figured that trend was because we were already on such a heavy Soho House trend.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that no one's, maybe someone's working on it and I just don't know, but doing sort of a Babington House version, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in Palm Springs. I think we'll start to see some of those kind of models pop up.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, well, that's really interesting. Let's come back to that, because I'm actually really curious about the, you know, the privatization of hospitality. But you know, before we visit that, let's go to the, you know, the role of public space. And Rudy, you know, San Francisco, you know, that's the origins of Parking Day. LA, we brought Parking Day to LA in 2007, but it was already there in San Francisco. And then that evolved into the parklets that we see everywhere throughout our, you know, most of our cities have parklets now. What role do you see, you as a designer and architect, and, you know, your expertise with parklets? Can you share, you know, I think you might have some slides to show us, if you can walk us through some of the steps you're taking.
Sure, I'd love to. So I'll just share my screen for a second. I think there's a few things about parklets in particular that are really interesting to us. A couple things I brought up earlier, as did Alexis and Tara, this idea of sort of partnering with jurisdictions to help make it easy for small businesses to add them. So these are just a few, you know, these are all starting construction in the next like 2 weeks. And so part of the idea here as well, and the graphics are a little bit in progress, but part of the idea with, you know, these several, so we offered a series of pro bono services to these restaurants to do, and along with the city to kind of create, I'm just kind of going through these slides quickly, just a sort of quick parklet design guide, so that they could just download this essentially and choose a strategy and a scheme. We worked with Public Works to come up with really simple like drainage details, guardrail details, ADA accessibility. We worked with a landscape firm as well to help us, you know, plant selection. I'm pro any parklet. If a restaurant feels like they want to put up those Public Works barricades and some lights, anything that activates the street is great. I don't want to be, you know, remotely elitist about parklets. They should be whatever you can make. But for us, we were thinking, you know, if you can incorporate some design, get, you know, teams of people to help these businesses out, and incorporate graphics in a way that allows for high visibility, and, for example, takes themes that exist with within the restaurant, whether it's their logo. This is a Mediterranean restaurant in our Elmwood neighborhood in Berkeley that has a certain logo that we then kind of abstracted for the graphic design on the side rails, stuff that would be really easy, doable with paint. Nothing, again, too expensive, incorporating landscaping and plants and things that people can build themselves. I think those are all ways that parklets can be done quickly, but with a kind of visual appeal that both deals with branding and advertising for the restaurant and makes it an appealing space, but also, and more importantly, safety for people, for cars as they're driving by, really catches their eye. So those are some of the strategies that we've been using, and I think that the more that we can do to help our communities and to help, also I think a subset of really important folks in the hospitality industry that we haven't talked about so much yet are all the workers and the employees, really concerned for the safety of restaurant workers, having them spend more time outside and less time inside. There's a lot of cities across the United States that are allowing indoor dining, and I think that can be definitely a concern for the servers that are working there. So anywhere we can add public space, I think, vibrant public space, and think about the safety and health of people in the community is positive.
Thank you. Very important to consider how the project or the hotel, the restaurant, how important it is for it to connect with the community. So that sort of brings me right back to what Lauren brought up with hotels that are now becoming private membership clubs. I really am struggling with whether or not we want to accept that as a path forward. I know it's already sort of, moving quickly that way with a lot of, sort of trophy real estate projects. But, how do we reconcile that with the need that we need to make sure that, everyone has access to healthy places?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I'm sorry if I made that sound. There are going to be both totally private and a blur. And so like you can, in other words, you can have membership. So you're allowed to that pool, you're allowed to that restaurant. A lot of co-working is starting to happen into hotels. So this was already happening like at the, I'm forgetting the name, the one in Chicago that's been so famous for its co-working. There's a monthly fee. You go in there and you can work, you can be served, you get to know the hotel people. So it's kind of like your little home away from home, but yet there's hotel guests and anyone can go in there. So my version of this, it's going to be a little bit of a both. It will still be a hotel. It can have, and some of the more high-end ones may be totally private, but they'll still be hotels. And then there's those that will still be open more to the public. I mean, the way hotels made their money open to the public was selling food and beverage, right? So now you can pay that same amount. You might not have to drink all day long, but you can sit there and use the facilities and work and do your kind of thing.
So Michael, what are you noticing, especially with some of the projects? Are your clients looking to be risk averse and sort of membership driven? Obviously, a lot of football stadiums are built that way.
Yeah, I think that most of our clients haven't gone to extreme thought about shifting to private. I think there are people that play in that realm, and then the more traditional developers are thinking about it this more similar to what they're used to. But I think, like Lauren mentioned, it's kind of blending, taking the aspects, the benefits of having those private amenities and open access to the community, but also having it where it's a more of a public realm as well. So it's not just exclusive, but it can be more inclusive.
So Michael, one of the comments you added before this discussion was, the importance of designing for emotion. And, that's something that I think, as we have this Zoom call today, we're all missing out on serendipity. We're all missing out on the sensorial experiences that, we're being deprived of because we're doing everything through our screens. But, what role do you see hospitality with regards to designing for emotion, and how are we going to get back there? Because mental health is is equally as important as our physical health. And how can we sort of move ourselves toward making sure emotion remains priority?
Right. I think, you know, a lot of design is done by the designer's instinct and experience, but I think we can take it a little bit further and start to map the psychology about how people interact with spaces and what those interactions result in, what types of emotions, and how can we start to collect data to understand those results and more streamline or customize our design approach to get to focus, to get those focused emotions that we're trying to achieve. I think, yeah, the well-being aspects of and mental health of being, you know, remote and distant from everybody is something that we all are concerned about, and how we need to get back to being able to interact physically, and, you know, certainly figuring out how to get that into the hotel experience, the hospitality experience is at the forefront of all of our minds. But we're starting the process about really going into a deeper research of understanding about how to be more effective or really maximize being able to focus emotions and get the results that we're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Michael. We're going to take questions from the audience in a couple of minutes, but I want to go back to Tara. And this is really about your approach with regards to the interaction you have with your fellow, you know, architects and designers at KFA, as well as how you're interacting with your clients, and, you know, some of the best practices that you might be able to share with us with regards to, you know, how do you keep that serendipity alive so that you're able to come up with some, you know, innovative design responses?
I think that the biggest shift that I've seen professionally is the accessibility, particularly of clients and the humanness that we are now communicating with. You know, I mean, I already knew my clients personally, but there's more of an opportunity to connect. I think just more big picture, I think generally speaking, this has caused people to realize the importance of connecting and the importance of a neighbor and that community. So I think that, you know, you might have to try a little harder to get there, but I've seen a lot of creativity in ways just within KFA and how we've figured out ways to connect both virtually, but in a social distanced outdoor way as well. And that has, you know, it's allowed us to develop relationships that we might not if we were in an office situation. So I don't know what that evolves to. I hope we don't go back to the way it was. I hope we end up in a place that takes the lessons from this and incorporates it into the new way we live.
Thank you. So Alexis, before we go to the audience for questions, you know, I'm going to ask each of you to, you know, share maybe an observation that you want to make sure that you, you know, contribute today to this conversation. And I can come back to you if it's.
Sure. Yeah, come back to me.
Okay, Rudy, what's your sort of gut feeling on all of this right now? Like.
I think that, you know, there's so many great comments that have been made from all of our colleagues. And I think that one thing that has come about this year for so many people is an understanding that we're in a critical time and a critical place. So, what choices we make as designers and how we advocate both for our clients and sort of for the public at large is really, really important. And whether it's choices that we make, you know, recommendations that we make to our clients, or whether it's kind of advocating for people that are affected by our design choices in a way that we don't normally think. and also kind of taking advantage of jumping on some of these ideas, like, Tara and Alexis have been saying, and Lauren and Michael as well, like jumping on some of these ideas that are coming about as a response to a crisis and trying to make them kind of permanent. I would say those are all really like jumping on the good things and trying to phase out some of the choices that we've made as designers and as an industry in the past.
Thank you. And we'll go to Lauren next. Lauren, just final thoughts before we go to the audience questions.
Oh, this is something I had been thinking about for a long time anyway. And I think that what this for me has made me realize people are biophilic. In other words, they inherently seek nature. And we've spent so much time in the architectural and development world building these big, tall buildings that cut nature out completely. And I think that's come back to bite us. On paper, you can't control your HVAC system unless you shut it out. But what does that really mean? It means it's an internal machine that's just recirculating whatever's in it. So it really has made me realize that we have to embrace nature. We have to embrace the environment, and we have to go back to natural air and things that are good about. We all want to be outside right now, and that's not going to go away. I think that's going to be a big impact that this pandemic leaves with all of this. I'm already starting to see high-rise buildings with more outdoor spaces cut into it, so people can go out onto them. So I think that we have to rethink the whole architecture and the environment, HVAC systems, embracing nature, bringing it in, etc.
Thank you. So Michael and Alexis, before we go to the audience here, share your most poignant remarks.
If I may, Michael,
Sure.
I would echo what Lauren's saying, but I would also say that this sort of international global pause is an opportunity to start to look at what we're really creating and why are we doing it. And there's, in my opinion, there's no room for design that's not intended to be powerful and really redefine what our human experience is. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think the this pause in our business and interaction has really given us an opportunity to step back and look at it from a wider lens. And yeah, we're definitely, everyone's going to be more interested in wellness and air quality, sustainability. I think it'll accelerate the measures that we already had in place, I think, towards creating a better planet, a safer planet, a more sustainable outcome will be on the forefront of all of our projects. And I think it'll actually benefit getting to the goals where we had established for 2030. And while it's been 5 months now, it's going to help us, I think, get there much faster, just because we've taken a step back, looked at it, and realized the importance of everything. Yeah, I think it'll definitely impact the way we design buildings in the future for the better, for sure.
Thank you, Michael. So we're going to start with a few questions I have with the audience. I'm going to queue up Giordano. Giordano, are you there? Can you hear us? Can you unmute yourself? And so this is really a question that go ahead, Giordano, you're on.
Hey, yeah, so just food trucks and mobilization of restaurants and hospitality is basically the question. I think there's a lot of underutilized spaces in the city. Bank of California Stadium, they have an excellent space. They do festivals out there for the games. Parking garages, the Row has a huge parking garage that's totally vacant. I know there's some garages that are used for kitchens right now. And while I'm not totally happy or like excited about the idea of eating in a parking garage, I think out of necessity, perhaps that's a conversation to have. Just seeing if anybody knows anything about that, if there's any incentive to, I guess, continue with that train of thought.
Thank you. Anyone have an answer or an insight? You may have
I love that you bring up Yola. We support. They contributed to our Chinese New Year party.
Well, so, we mentioned Austin, Texas earlier when we were, all introducing ourselves. And, Austin has all these amazing little outdoor areas created throughout the town that have been where you assemble parking, like picnic tables, and the taco trucks are permanently there, or the barbecue trailers. And I'm wondering, let's go back to Tara with this question. Tara, with LA, they're trying this, occasionally, but what's successful about it, or what can make it more successful as it relates to this conversation we're having?
I think that so taking a step back, big picture, we are the businesses that we're able to support right now are retail and outdoor dining establishments. So places that have food to go, places that you can dine outside. So bringing it back to the food truck concept, that's something that has very low overhead compared to a brick and mortar store. And it's something that can be very reactionary to, events going on, or, we're going to go by the LA River on a weekend because there's all these bikers there. So there's a flexibility there that I think if that enables those business owners to adapt, then, it seems like having the flexibility would make each truck more viable. So I think the advent of the food truck and some of them that have become brick and mortar stores since then, I'd be super interested in hearing from them on now, at this point in history, would they prefer to go back to the food truck model, or what are the advantages of having that brick and mortar store, and what's the evolution of that? What's the next step, having seen both sides of the coin?
Thank you. As we go to our next question, I just want to underscore, though, also the importance of street vendors and how they're such a fundamental part of our, hospitality experience in any city. Drew, you have a question about public showers. Are you on the call? Drew.
On the call.
Well, welcome.
Hello. I have this question. It occurs to me that with changes that are happening, you want to take a bus and go someplace, but you come up disheveled. You take a bicycle to someplace and you come up disheveled. What if there were talking about hospitality, you gotta shower someplace. Does anybody have room for that in their thoughts?
Thank you.
It's interesting that you bring that up. And in this hotel that we did actually in Anguilla, they have a lot of salt in the water that they use for natural cleansing, and they have a lot of limestone rocks. So we created this washing fountain in front of the restaurant. This was pre-COVID. And so before you could enter into the restaurant, this water fell from the ceiling and you were sort of obligated to wash your hands in the salt and use the water. We weren't really thinking about germs. We were just thinking about the ancient practice of washing before you entered someone's home or in someone's environment. So I think it's a very interesting thing. Now, showers are maybe a little more full body showers, maybe a little more difficult because of the whole changing of clothes. But I think the idea of washing was an ancient history tradition that we've sort of let go by the wayside. So I think it's a very interesting concept. And I think that you may start to see more of that engaged and embraced, because it's actually would be a good thing.
That was a good answer. And I think Alan from Toto should have put his plug in here.
All right.
Definitely. We always appreciate Toto's support. They've been such a friend of AIA Los Angeles. So we have a question from Ilaria. Ilaria, are you able to unmute yourself? it had to do with HVAC systems, and she brings up the conversation about HVAC lobbies, which I really how powerful sort of our manufacturer and supply, like what can we do to really make sure that we're doing more passive systems, more natural ventilation, especially when that's code related. Anybody have a good strategy on overcoming all of our HVAC concerns? I know affordable housing projects, even though they might be near the ocean, are still required to have air conditioning. When I'm living in a 1921, little tiny bungalow that's never had air conditioning, even during this heat wave, we're doing fine. But just your thoughts on that. How do we go back to more passive natural ventilation?
I think, operable walls, California is such a great climate. You can really take advantage of that, where operable wall systems, which really gets you that connection with that indoor-outdoor experience that everybody longs for anyway, is just a simple measure that people want anyway. So it's got the benefits, but it also is pretty achievable. We often do it for restaurants and things, but it's not to say you wouldn't be able to do that for the lobby experience as well, and really reduce the amount of forced air flow that may be a concern as far as like transmitting viruses or other things. But I think also looking at the improvements to the mechanical systems and how we can better filter and utilize UV lighting to treat the air that's being mechanically forced through.
Thank you. So we have Michael Kemp, who has a good question here. Michael, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes, it's a pretty basic question, and I think for the whole panel is, do you anticipate for future restaurants that we may have to basically increase the footprint of the dining area just for the viability of the restaurant, i.e., many times the restaurant owner will say, I need to get 150 seats in here. Obviously with social distancing, do we see that footprint increasing? And on newer projects, have you been running into that?
I'll say my experience, sorry to interrupt, but when we were looking at it with developers before this whole thing, there was a certain rule of thumb where you had to get a certain density of seating, not just from a cash flow standpoint, but really to make people feel like the restaurant was active and successful. If you start to spread that distance out and you have that less activity, then people start to question, is that really, the right place to be? And so I think you got to figure out a balance between density and activity going forward.
Michael, I could chime in on that too. For the past 10 years, everything about a restaurant has been access to the kitchen and to the food prep, and that really being the heart of it. And that's been our move away from the fine dining model. But I'm not sure everybody wants everybody right up on the food line these days. I think some of the 6-foot spacing, as we culturally become more desensitized to what's occurring, it's just going to naturally decrease. And the sort of footprint need we see right now is going to go back down. But the question is, what does it do in terms of just setting a standard for people's expectation of behavior, and right now we're in a model where most of the energy is, in a way, it's like fine dining again, because it's all focused on your little pod. Is that something that shifts or does it stay? I don't know. I do think that the idea of a pretty powerful experiential immersion is going to persist, especially as a lot of sadly, as a lot of our restaurants will fail into the fall, and we're going to, our numbers reduce. I think New York has already lost 9,000 out of 27,000, and they expect 50% by the end of the year.
The other factor in that is, how does outdoor dining in the public realm, how does that, are you able to add tables in the public realm that are on square footage that you're not leasing? Or how does that, that's a creative, you know, in more suburban places where, you know, people are taking over some of their parking lot. That's easy. You don't need the parking spots. But in a situation, in an urban situation where, you know, Culver City is a great example, you know, that space on the sidewalk or the street that's closed isn't necessarily, and I don't know the specifics of it, maybe it is, but I would imagine that it's not a leased space. And is that something that is bringing revenue that, you know, offsets the loss of space, dining space that's interior?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that the density can be made up to some extent. I think for a certain type of restaurant in particular, or even something like a food truck, when you're using sort of public space, then you can really, and if it's, you know, a smaller restaurant that doesn't have too many tables on the inside, you can really make up a lot of that by sitting outdoors. If you're talking about, you know, really huge restaurant, that probably harder to create that kind of density. But again, you're probably thinking of the place that has more resources. So I do think outdoor space is a really good solve for that question.
Thank you. This is a question from the audience, and it really has to do with if any of you are integrating, you know, VR or augmented reality or virtual reality into your hospitality projects. What role do you see technology playing in general with regards to that, especially in contrast to what we just discussed earlier with Michael's observation about the importance of emotion, about sensorial connection and serendipity. So I'm curious to know the panel's response to virtual reality, augmented reality, hospitality.
We're sort of looking at it, and we've already sort of been looking at gobos for outdoor street lighting situations, and we got the Standard Hotel had last year, before this happened, had asked us to look at capitalizing some rooms that they have without windows, and we had been thinking about them as sort of art rooms, you know, fully experiential, and not necessarily AR, VR, but circadian and very created, like with lighting sort of rooms. We're not doing the project with them, but but we're everything around what we can apply to space. But also I would say that Burning Man is all online this year too. So that's, I don't know if Karen's into that, but.
Yeah, Karen, congratulations on your FAIA. Are you in the audience? Let's hear from you. Put her on the spot. It doesn't have to be about Burning Man.
Karen had to drop off.
Okay. Well, Amanda, you're with a firm that does so much, especially with adaptive reuse. Do you want to share a few observations that you're finding with your hospitality projects?
Yeah, I would say that most of the comments that have been shared reflect what we're understanding too. We've been involved in the sidewalk dining, so it's, you know, we're just right in there with everybody. And just recently released some studies that we've been working on in charrette form to look at what we're calling or terming urban reprogramming that suggests, you know, similarly to what Michael was talking about, repurposing existing hospitality spaces, because that is, you know, that is our focus, existing buildings. So, you know, kind of right there with everybody else.
Thank you, Amanda. So Alexis, you asked this question earlier in your responses to me, and you know, I actually think, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, this might be an appropriate question for you to ask your fellow speakers here, but it's really about new typologies of hospitality that we're discovering. You know, we're so far in this conversation, we've talked about hotels, we've talked about restaurants, we've talked about, you know, membership clubs. but what are some of the, for everyone else, what are some of the emerging typologies that you're recognizing that, maybe we don't have a habit of interacting with yet, but that, that are sort of on the forefront?
I can answer.
Okay.
It's my question.
Sure.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think that's what's one of the lasting changes is going to be. Shout out to Amanda. She and I went to school together. In the F&B model, there's like, it's like a shift away from big box stores because of all the delivery. But I think we really need chef curatorial. It's like, I don't trust the delivery person necessarily to pick out my specialties when I'm having that dinner party. So it's like a lot of little fast casual models with a market component that has had a chef's hand on it. And I also, I see different, I think we've needed a sound spa forever. I don't know why we don't have one. I think all these sort of different touch points in nature and different ways to inhabit it, that, take this, that, at least for my generation, I don't know anyone that uses traditional churches or synagogues, really, so we need a place to experience the divine, and I think that ends up being, I think that can come out of hospitality and sort of be in nature too.
So you're almost advocating for an integratron on every corner. Just like
I love it. I saw Moby play there, laying on the ground.
Well, so, for the other speakers, then this is a really interesting concept that, whether or not we're going to see more Meow Wolves, of the Santa Fe fame, or more Dean and DeLucas, that Alexis is referring to, where you have the chef really there to help you with your shopping experience. I'm curious, the rest of the speakers, and if you haven't been to Meow Wolf, maybe you don't know what I'm talking about, but I imagine some of you.
Yeah, can you elaborate? I'm not familiar with that one.
Well, Meow Wolf is a place in Santa Fe that once was a big box retail store that they reprogrammed into this interactive sort of, discovery. If you haven't been there, I'm not really sure how to describe it, but it's, if anyone else on this call wants to contribute to the discussion, it's this fantastical, mystical place that you just sort of open the refrigerator door and then all of a sudden you're in, Alice in Wonderland. But it becomes a way to reprogram some of our, retail space that is no longer, as we're entering this culture of, I want to call it post-consumerism, but a lot of people just think we're shifting completely to online retail. But I also think a lot of people are just buying less junk. We need less t-shirts and trinkets. So I'm just curious if anyone else here is looking at new typologies with regards to hospitality as it relates to sort of that serendipity, the emotional connection that you have with the public.
I would say one place that I think is really successful that I've been to recently is Essex Market in Manhattan. And that's not new actually at all, but it's maybe you could say like unfortunately rare, and in the fact that it's a public market, but it's a sort of a food hall, and maybe one of the kind of first inspirations for a lot of the food halls that have come since. But it has a way that I think is a really equitable way to move forward, which is a sort of public-private partnership. So the City of New York provides a lot of incentives and opportunities for small, family-owned local vendors to sell, amazing food, prepared food, produce, et cetera. And the prices are really, really reasonable. And so what happens is instead of, having a place like a Dean and DeLuca, which just changes the neighborhood and raises prices so much, it's actually a very, very fairly priced market. It's great for the the business owners there as well as the locals. So a single mom with a few kids can shop there in the evening, and it's right in the heart of the city. And so I think the more we can sort of advocate for places like that moving forward, I think would be really great. And it's the design is actually really well done. It was kind of redesigned recently, and I can't remember who did it, but they did a really good job, and that came from a lot of public funding as well. So the more we can get cities involved in a lot of our cities and public kind of jurisdictions involved in our decision making, I think the better spaces we can make for lots of people.
Thank you, Rudy. I want to go to Lauren with this question, even though it's maybe not fair. The bankruptcy of Neiman Marcus, for instance. Neiman Marcus is such a staple of the Texas. We're all proud of our Neiman Marcus, and so much of their experience as a retail environment was to attract you into their space and come hang out and have your coffee up on the top floor and just really be there for the joy of being in the store. Lauren, are you looking at with regards to retail becoming impacted, as the connection between retail and hospitality? What are you observing?
I think they're all good questions, and I must admit the bankruptcy of Neiman Marcus, you hit on a very sad subject for me. I mean, I grew up thinking that was the big deal if I got to go into Neiman's and have anything from the Neiman store and be a part of that. And the Neiman's in Dallas, I don't know if any of you guys have experienced that, certainly you from Fort Worth have, but that is truly an experience. A lot of you were talking about what I would call concierge buying, and can your grocer help you select? And I think that the world is going to go more to that. When you go into Neiman's Dallas, they can get you something from anywhere around the world and really shop for you personally. The fact that physical retail is going away is very sad to me, because I think in some ways retail therapy, as they called it, it was a very relaxing thing to be able to do, to go shopping with someone. Even if you just bought that t-shirt you were talking about, or just bought a little bit of makeup, it still was an outlet and something that people enjoyed. And shopping online is a whole nother thing. For me, it's stressful. I don't like it. I do think, and I don't know how this relates to hospitality, although I think that if you can't travel to France or Italy or wherever, and you want something from there, I do think there is going to be the growth of these concierge type people that edit, they buy, they curate for you, they get to know you. I've actually thought about this for a while in some of our really high-end boutique hotels. Those concierge people sort of help them with their lifestyle no matter where they are. So I think something will develop out of that. It still won't substitute for the physically going into Neiman's and sitting at that little bar and enjoying watching people trying on clothes. I hope that someday there's a resurgence back to retail, but I think it's all going to be about service. I mean, it's not going to be about just going in there and buying that thing off the rack. It's going to be about the service and the knowledge that they bring to you and the connections that they make for you. So whether it's, so I do hope there's a resurgence in it and the experience of retail. And I hope that it merges more back in with food and beverage. And then oddly, I hope that, and you brought up the gardens, I'm out in Montauk right now. There's lots of personal gardens on Long Island. The idea of bringing personal commerce into these, maybe it does become less big box and it becomes more of the local market where you can have your concierge from the Neiman's type selling that stuff and your local little person selling their things. And so that's the experience that's healthy and fair and equitable, but still retail.
So, thank you. So thank you very much. We're almost out of time. So before we end our morning together and everyone gets to back to their work, I want to just go through each person, your final remarks, and we'll start with Michael, and we'll work our back way to Tara. So Tara, you're going to have the last word, but Michael, we look forward to sort of your final observations.
Yeah, I think for everyone listening in today, I think really the future is exciting about how we can take a step back and look at, as I said earlier, how to really improve the social situation. I think this time to reflect has really given us an opportunity to look more closely at how to move forward in the future, and I think this is exciting. We can leverage it. Well, I think next year is going to be really challenging for many. I think once we come out of it and the year after, it'll be for the better, and we'll accelerate our measures of doing the right thing socially, environmentally, and I think we'll get where we need to be at a hopefully much faster rate than before.
Thank you. And so, Lauren, look forward to your final thoughts as we end the panel today.
Well, I've talked a lot, but I do think it's a time of reinvention, and that's exciting to me. And, again, I'm a bit of a Texan, so we look at all disasters like hurricanes as an opportunity to rebuild and rethink. And I think this is certainly one of them. I hope that the result of this is purposeful living and purposeful working. I hope that architects, designers, and engineers work more closely together to really think about how we bring nature in. I hope that organic gardeners and big box retailers work more closely together to bring people the experiences that people want. People want authentic, cool experiences. And so I think it will be a time for people to partner and to really think about how you bring this to people in a cool, wonderful way that isn't just about making money. That's really a bit more about making a society and making a healthier, physically and mentally, world that we live in.
Thank you. Alexis.
Oh, we like to refer to this quote on hospitality a lot by Louis de Jacquard, which says that hospitality is the great virtue of the soul who cares for the entire universe through the ties of humanity. And I obviously support everything Michael and Lauren have said so far. I think that this is an opportunity for us in our sector to really move the energy of our space, which is generosity, into shaping that and creating models that create a better designed world.
Thank you. Rudy, what are your final thoughts for today?
So I also wanted to thank everyone here on the panel and all the folks who joined so early in the morning, and you, Will, for putting this together. I feel like there's been lots of really, really great comments, and I think I've kind of beaten the public-private thing over the head, but just really starting to move the discipline towards thinking about our choices and policies and real actual legitimate policies. I think we've seen such amazing shifts in public perception of housing policy over the years. I think even 5 years ago, folks would not have been so aware of single family zoning and the kind of history and issues that it's created. And the same thing I would say about a lot of policies and regulations around how we design and plan our public space, and how to focus it away from cars and more towards humans in a way that can help businesses, employees, and the general public. And I think that we do need to advocate for that very strongly.
Thank you so much. So Tara, how do we sort of bring all this together?
I think I studied urban design in Tanzania years back, and I was studying a squatter community, and the thesis of what we were studying when we were there was, without the resources, without the money, without the availability of certain comforts, you really see what a community needs to survive. And there's parallels here. I think through this whole process, we have found as people what we need, or we're trying to find, because we're limited in so many aspects of our everyday life. It's helping us to realize what is important. And I think coming out the other end, will have a different perspective on what we really value about how we experience living, traveling, eating, socializing, being part of a community. And so I look forward to having that new perspective collaboratively within this industry and understanding how we move forward, but really focusing on what's valuable to us as a society, as Los Angeles. So that's just something that you know, I think is a silver lining of this whole thing.
Well, thank you so much. You know, if anyone else has a final remark, you know, be sure to add that. But, you know, I want to say thank you to Chupless Gooding Architects. They've been our presenting sponsor for this entire series. I look forward to connecting with you all. Next week, we have our 4th annual Encompass Conference, which is next Wednesday and next Thursday, which will, you know, visit everything related to social equity, justice, racial disparities. And we welcome your involvement in that discussion. But with that, I just want to say thank you to our speakers, Michael, Alexis, Rudy, Lauren, and Tara. Delighted that you were able to join us this morning.